Hey friends, welcome back for the third video of week 2 in Peace and Power's Bible study on Ruth. Peace and Power is the peace of Jesus Christ to change your life and the power of God to change your world. We're looking at Ruth, and as we study Ruth, we are going to be learning how to study the Bible. So studying scripture as we study the book of Ruth. We've been working through the first chapter, and we saw that in verses 1 through 5 are the introduction, but this week we've looked at verses 6 and 7 and Naomi's decision to leave and how that sets up Naomi as the main character of at least this first chapter, if not the whole book. And then in the last video we've looked at verses 19 through 22 and establishing the conflict, and that the conflict is between Naomi and God. Now we're going to backtrack a little bit and look at the middle verses, the extended conversation that happens along the way as Naomi and her two daughters-in-law are returning to Bethlehem, returning to Judah. And just let me summarize some of the conversation, verses 8 through 14. I am not going to read those, but you can find them online or in the Bible. Verses 8 through 14, Naomi initiates the conversation by encouraging her daughters-in-law to return to their mother's home. At first, both Orpah and Ruth are unpersuaded by Naomi's encouragement. Then Naomi makes a stronger case for that, and we see that by the time verse 14 is, Orpah is convinced to return to her home, or her parents' home, her mother's home, but Ruth is not convinced. And there we are going to pick up with their verses, reading verses 15 through 18. And again, I'll be reading out of the Holman. Naomi said, "Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her God. Follow your sister-in-law." But Ruth replied, "Do not persuade me to leave you or go back and not follow you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you live, I will live. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do this to me, and even more, if anything but death separates you and me." When Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped trying to persuade her. Looking at those verses, we find it interesting that in verse 15, Naomi says that Orpah returned to her God. Now, this is an interesting and somewhat funny statement that we would find on the lips of an Israel. If Naomi is an Israelite who is true to Yahweh and believes that Yahweh, the God of the Israelites, is the one true God, this idea that Orpah returned to her God, which was probably Shemash, the god of the Moabites, as being a god, this is a funny thing for a monotheistic Israelite to say. However, we see that in the introduction, Elimelech, Naomi, Mahlon, and Chilion left Israel, left the land of Yahweh to find food in Moab, which is not necessarily a strong sign of faithfulness. This is an idea that maybe Moab's God and Moab's people were better protected from this famine we find in the introduction than Yahweh's people, the Israelites. Also, we saw in the last section of this chapter, Naomi is in direct conflict with Yahweh. Yahweh is her antagonist. She feels afflicted by Yahweh. So Naomi's faith might not be that strong. Naomi might not have what we would consider the Orthodox Israelite faith in Yahweh, which is interesting considering Ruth's outstanding verbal commitment to Naomi, Naomi's people, and Naomi's God. Ruth commits to Naomi's God. Ruth, as a Moabite, her only knowledge of Yahweh may have been from Naomi's compromised testimony. Ruth may have learned all she knows about Yahweh from Naomi, Elimelech, Mahlon, and Chilion. That might be the only information she has, and yet that is enough information for her to make this grand commitment, and your God will be my God. I know we've been talking about what it says, what it means, and how it applies. Well, here's an interesting application, is that the imperfect faith, like the faith of Naomi, can still draw others to God. Thinking through that, you might be able to apply it that you are not necessarily disqualified from being used by God to draw others to you. And then thinking through these verses as well, we see that Naomi is in open conflict with Yahweh. Yahweh is her antagonist. Yahweh is afflicting her. That means Ruth's role in this story for the book of Ruth, Ruth, a Moabite, not an Israelite, but a Moabite, and a recent convert to faith in Yahweh, is used by God as Naomi's companion to help resolve the conflict between God and Naomi. Ruth is used by God to bring Naomi closer to him. The application of this is God can use anyone for his good purposes. Thinking through the conversation between between Naomi and her daughter-in-laws, especially between Naomi and Ruth, we see these two big ideas. Naomi's imperfect faith is able to draw Ruth closer to God, and Ruth, who is a Moabite and a recent convert to following God, is able to be Naomi's companion and used by God to draw Naomi back into a reconciled relationship with God. Now, let's look at homework for this week. Between today and next week, answer the following questions in the remaining scenes. So we've done up through chapter 1. So in the scenes in chapter 2, 3, and 4, who initiates the conversation? Who initiates the action? Who says the most? And who gets the last word? Read through the book of Ruth, reread the story, answering those questions. And we'll talk about some of that next week. Who are the main actors in the rest of the book? As always, you can join us live on Monday nights. There's 2 ways to plug in. Live Monday nights, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time via Zoom, and the weekly wrap-ups that you find on YouTube and on my WordPress blog. All that information is below, as long as how to find us on social media via Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, WordPress, and YouTube. All those links are in the description below as well. Thank you for having this conversation with us. Hopefully it was valuable to you, and I hope to see you again soon.